Good afternoon and welcome to the SitRep for today. It is the 22nd day of October in 2023. And this is the situation report where I go through news stories that I've found in the past I don't know, what are we talking? Week, I guess? Probably week. There's been a lot happening in the past week. And anyway, I point out the things that I find interesting from the perspective of prepping, how to keep ourselves better prepared. Try to make it a little bit more specific to Aussie New Zealand sort of audience, being that most prepper channels that I watch are from North America or Europe somewhere. So, welcome if you are from those areas. I appreciate you watching. But yeah, also welcome if you're from Australia. Aussies, how you all going? Try and get these cameras lined up. Get the missus's sewing stuff out of the way and set up my little studio here. All right, what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about gold and silver and how it's on the move a little bit, or has been in the last week. So what's been happening in the stock markets, because that's going to be more pertinent, I think, to Aussies a little bit. I might touch on some economic data that's been coming out as well that's a bit disturbing. And of course, I will throw in the almost obligatory at this point Israel-Gaza information, because it's kind of a big deal. There's a lot of information that's flowing around there. And the big thing I want to start off with about Israel-Gaza is that one thing that I've picked up in the last week is we've got to be really, really critical about information that's coming out here. And like, if you're on one side of this and you getting your team colors out and whatever, good for you. Like, cool. All right, that's fine. But I would really stress, don't fall into confirmation bias. Don't just read the news that reaffirms your own personal belief or whatever team you're following in this one. Really try and dig into things and have a look and even pump the brakes. So I read something in the news at the moment. I'm like, okay, interesting. I'm not going to do anything about that right now. I'm just going to sort of settle for a little bit and see what actually comes out, because we've seen a number, not just one or two, but like I've seen 4 that I can think of off the top of my head, major credible news sources, whatever that means nowadays, but credible news sources that have pretty much screwed the pooch on their stories and got it totally wrong. So they're jumping the gun as well. They're going off rumor and innuendo, and a lot of the journalists and the media crews that are on the ground at the moment. And I've got some connections in there, so I actually do get I get to peek behind the curtain a little bit on this one, and get information from other sources that isn't news, like what's printed out to everyone else. Like, they're under a lot of stress there, and so they're putting out stuff that maybe is not necessarily thoroughly investigated, is not necessarily thoroughly vetted information. So my point of this is, take all information that's coming out with a little bit of, not, just a tiny grain of salt. And there is this stuff going on there, but don't just jump on it. And certainly I would really recommend you don't jump on it from the perspective of like, well, look what this team's doing, or look what this side's doing, blah, blah, blah. They're all bad, okay? I don't care which way you cut this pie. All sides in war are bad. And that is coming to you from somebody who has fought in war. And I wouldn't say like my side was the good guys, the ultimate good guys. There was bad things that happened there as well. So the voice of experience. All right. So what's happening over there? A lot of stuff that's going on. I'm going to jump into some stories here that have been sent through to me, and some I've pulled up myself. What I'm seeing, my kind of take on this is, what we're seeing is the unfortunate movement towards what I would call pre-World War III. The unfortunate part of this, if you're into history at all, you can see that conflicts that happen somewhere in the world don't necessarily kick off huge conflicts, but it's the alliances and the people that are tied into it that tend to then ramp it up a little bit. And that's what we're seeing play out right now. We're starting to see the battle lines drawn, and it is looking like a bit of an East versus West. It's what everyone thought it would be. The people that we thought would be, possibly working together are working together. Again, take all this information with a grain of salt, because some of the sources that I'm going to give you here are definitely pro-Western propaganda. Some of them are pulled from Eastern propaganda. sources, but it does look like this East versus West, and we're kind of seeing this conglomeration of Middle Eastern countries, Islamic countries, China, Russia versus West versus US and plus friends, which Australia, we are definitely in there. Australia and New Zealand, we're definitely tied into that. Our card is tied to that horse. G'day to Regan and Norman. Norman, always welcome your input. Information that's come out from a few different sources here. This one from rfa.org. Hamas fighters may be using North Korean weapons, experts say. Some of the video footage that they've taken apart and analysed, they're saying that this is actually North Korean type munitions that they're looking at. There is another story on this. Let me just dig it up. North Korea, where is it? New evidence reveals North Korea played a role in Hamas's ruthless assault on Israel. Where is it? New evidence reveals North Korea played a role in Hamas's ruthless assault on Israel. What they're looking at here is basically a lot of the weapons used, a lot of the munitions apparently was from North Korea. So they're saying that North Korea supplied a lot of these weapons out into wherever, and they've ended up in Hamas's hands. Whether you can make the claim, like a lot of these media sources are, that it was a direct connection, which it quite possibly could have been. I'm not saying it is not, but it could have just been North Korea sold it and then that got on-sold and then that got on-sold, i.e. the most likely thing that I would see is Iran probably buying munitions and weapons off North Korea and then selling it or just kind of gifting it to Hamas. Again, like this is all dependent on where you actually think this actually all sits and what your belief systems are on this, and whether you think that Iran is actually propping up Hamas or not, because there are some people out there who do not think that. Personally, I think it's like there is evidence that is, pretty there's pretty strong evidence in the affirmative of that. Ossault says, hey, from Kieran too. Been busy. I have been busy, or are you saying you've been busy? We've all been busy. Busy times. So that's one of the factors that we're seeing that's actually starting to line up, where we're seeing the split between the two parts of the world become a bit more formalized now with this. It's really got the potential here to kick off into something quite big. And if it does kick off into something quite big, then these sort of names that I just mentioned, your Russia against Hamas, whether this one, my interpretation of it was a bit dual-sided here. I go, yep, I can see maybe China is actually coming out and saying, hey, nah, you're going too strong here on Hamas. More likely, I think China's doing what China does quite a bit, is that they find a anti-Western sentiment and they jump on it and push it a little bit. So if people can remember back this far, which it wasn't that far ago, back, but China actually put out a tweet of a picture of an Australian soldier, photoshopped soldier, next to having a knife at an Afghan child's neck. Kind of saying that Aussies are war criminals and they were over there killing children in Afghanistan, all of which was just absolute lies. But what they were doing there was obviously jumping on to the fact that there was a lot of speculation and a lot of stuff going through courts at the time to do with specific Australian soldiers that may or may not have been involved in some sort of war crime type activity. So they were jumping on that and they were using it to incite a bit more anti-Western sentiment. So that's how I'm kind of reading this, them coming out and saying like, Israel's going too far against Hamas here. We're seeing that anti-Western sentiment. I mean, what does that mean for us? I mean, yeah, it puts out this general malaise into the global psyche, I guess, that the West is bad. Not to say that the West is great, it's the perfect system, but I would certainly pick it over any other system. So they're putting that out there, and I think the effect that we're going to see subtly, or maybe not so subtly, is what has been happening already, where we're seeing riots and protests spring up all over the world, especially throughout the Middle East, that are pro-Palestine. So pro-Palestinian protests are breaking out. But what we're not just seeing it contained within the Middle East. We're seeing it in places like Spain and London and the US. So this kind of thing coming out of China actually incites more of that sort of action, I think. I believe, at least. And that's what they're doing. That's what they want. They want to destabilize the current world power in the US. What else did I have here? Let's talk about what China's just done, and on the back of this, which is, I'm trying very hard to make this all link together in some sort of coherent way. China's just sent 6 ships over to, now there's dual reporting here, and I'm going to take the Hong Kong-based Chinese reporting on it as more gospel than the Western-based reporting, which is, I believe, more propaganda. So the Western-based reporting came out and said China sent 6 battleships into the Mediterranean towards Israel, whereas the reports from China, from Hong Kong news sources, was that they have sent them to the Middle East area. Now, they actually qualified that, because it was like, oh, they're sending ships. That's a pretty big deal, because the words that I read from both of these stories at the start tell me that they had ships there in China, and they're pushing them around the world all the way up through and getting right stuck in there. I don't think that's the case. I think what, according to what I can pull apart from the Chinese propaganda on this one, is that they've been there since May. They've been floating around there, doing exercises, doing other little deployment things, just sort of floating around the area, doing stuff. And it looks like more in the Gulf than in the Mediterranean. So I'm yet to actually get confirmation that they're anywhere near Mediterranean, which is a big deal, because we've got 2 US carriers that are currently in the Mediterranean, or one in the Mediterranean, bouncing around southern part of Cyprus, and one, I believe, that's going into the Mediterranean, or has just breached into the Mediterranean. So we've got 2 carriers, US carriers, there for 6 Chinese ships to go into the Mediterranean as well. That would be a pretty big deal. Like that, that's not a whole lot of water for 2 quite big boys to float around in. Interesting times, though, that China's also sending this out, because that's a pretty strong signal from China about what their intentions are here. They could be very hands-off. And if you think about what happened in Ukraine, you could argue that China's very hands-off with that. That China did things, involved in and around it, but for the main part, they were just like, sit back, wait and watch. It doesn't appear like they're going to sit back, wait and watch with this one. They seem pretty on the front foot with this kind of thing, which also kind of tells the lay person like me, it's like, okay. When you're looking at information that says this could be World War III, and this could just be a regional conflict that could blow over tomorrow, when I start to see China moving and taking interest in it, it tips the scales over here more to World War III to me. I'm not saying that it's going to be World War III, by the way. Speaking of which, though, an interesting story that's come out here. This one was titled 6 Terrifying Steps That Could See Gaza Crisis Spiral into World War III. And it's kind of like a flow chart of things that could happen. Israel overreacts. I'm not sure what they mean by overreacts here, the definition of overreact. If you asked me before all this happened, the defining thing about Israel's defense force, I would say overreaction, or probably overreach might be a better way to put it, or overpower. That's been the Israeli policy militarily for a very long time, and for many reasons. I'm not saying, like, I'm using those words, and I'm trying to not connect any sort of emotion to them. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying that's the way they do it. So something happens, Oh, you come in, you explode a bomb, you throw rocks at some of our soldiers, we will fire bullets back. You blow up a bomb here, we'll blow up a city block there. That's just the way it's been. So when they say Israel overreacts, I think, yeah, yeah, it's almost a given. Um, I would, for the scale of the attack that just happened, I would almost even argue that it might be historically underreaction could happen. But having said that, that could still be one huge, huge reaction that could happen. But yeah, Israel overreacts. If you're paying any attention to mainstream media at the moment, you can see that Palestine, I think, is winning the hearts and minds war on this one. Their propaganda war is solid. You can see people thinking like, no, 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 no. The right thing here is, you know, Gaza's in the right. And I'm not saying who is in the right or wrong, but that's what the mainstream media is saying. So they've kind of put Israel in a position now where almost Israel can't do what they normally do. Because if they do what they normally do, all of a sudden everyone's eyes are on it, which I always find odd. Like everyone's like, "Oh my god, Israel!" Or "Oh my god, Palestine." I'm like, this has been going on for like decades, right? You could have taken a fuck about this at any point in the last 10, 20 years if you wanted to. But now, because the mainstream media told you that you have to have a stance on this, now you do. Anyway, so step one, Israel overreacts. War spreads to Lebanon. There's a high chance of that happening, I think. There has been not orchestrated attacks, but definitely an increase in attacks that have happened from southern Lebanon into northern Israel. So the war could easily spread up to there. Hezbollah, I think, is teetering on the edge of entering this war. Once that happens, that's probably one of the big dominoes that I'd be looking for. Once that happens, I think there's going to be an inevitable roll of events that will precipitate many, many other things happening. The next one from this story was Syria and Russia team up. Can see that happening. Iran kicks off. Definitely can see that happening. Iran's doing a lot of rumbling at the moment, as in they're talking a lot of words. They're putting videos out. There's lots of propaganda coming out of their side of things. So definitely can see Iran pushing further into it. But I think at this point, what my take on it again is similar to what China is doing, that Iran is just kind of jumping on the coattails here and pushing further Western anti-Western sentiment into the space. Iran kicks off, UK, US enters the fight, Saudi Arabia forced in after that. And I wouldn't actually speculate on what side right now. Saudi Arabia. I mean, it would be a given assumption to me a week ago that Saudi Arabia would come in on the US side. But now, today, I'm actually unsure of what side Saudi Arabia comes into. All right, so that's kind of situation Israel-Gaza at the moment, with a few complicating factors in there. Now, I want to just springboard off the Saudi Arabia entering into this thing. I talked about this on the last one. We're facing right now, I think, what could be potentially a huge shortfall in fuel, in oil products coming into the West. Everything is set up that way right now, as I'm speaking. There's a lot of pieces that are involved here, and a lot of them are tilting the wrong way. The war in the general region will probably decrease oil production, or it will get used up quicker by other forces involved in it. But it then puts the pressure on some of these nations that are oil producing nations to really think about where they're sending their oil. And we've obviously already lost sources of oil through Russia, but to lose something like Saudi Arabia, or even generally, if war breaks out and we can't secure that area, secure the passage of oil, or even the production of oil from this area, this could be a huge, huge shortfall, which will mean, at best, for us, a dramatic increase in the price. And we're already seeing that in the stock market. It's one of these things that I'll talk about in the stock market, but we're already seeing fluctuations and increases in prices in things like crude oil prices. So only a matter of time till that kind of filters out, I think, to the Bowser. So again, as a bit of a warning, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future. But if you were to go out and buy a couple of jerrys and fill them up with some fuel, I would say that's probably a pretty good idea at the moment, at this moment in time. Maybe this whole thing blows over and everything gets all right, and everything's fine. Then you've got a couple extra jerrys of fuel. All right, no harm, no foul. But just as a warning, that could happen. That, as I said, that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, fuel rationing. Because I've said this before, you folks like you and I, we're not top of the ladder. we're bottom of the ladder, way bottom of the ladder. I won't speak for you, but definitely me. I'm bottom of the ladder. So when it comes to handing out stuff, if it's in short supply, I'm going to be one of the last ones to get it. So thinking about that, I'm talking. One of my closest friends, part of my mutual assistance group, he's on it. Just did a buy up of fuel this week for me, so really appreciate that. So I've got some fuel. He's got some fuel. We have some for the kind of foreseeable future, and the next step for me is like I'm starting to look at the need to drive around so much, and trying to figure out ways that in a very short amount of time can I really pare down how much I actually drive around and use that fuel. All right. So that's what's going on there. A couple other little interesting tidbits here. Putin has been spotted in China with the nuclear briefcase. So they've been having talks over there. US Department of State issues a rare worldwide caution alert. So they basically sent out an alert saying, to all US citizens to be cautious everywhere in the world. It's not like, hey, be cautious in this nation, be cautious in this nation, be cautious in this part of the world. It's like, just be cautious in the world now. That's a pretty big deal, I think. North Korea has been threatening US with preemptive nuclear strikes. I'm not sure what that is all about, really. I know exactly what it's all about. The US just when pre-positioned some bombers that are capable of nuclear payloads in South Korea, and so North Korea's come out and said, we will do a preemptive nuclear strike if we feel threatened enough. And then on top of that, the US just conducted allegedly a nuclear test, an underground nuclear test on their own soil. But allegedly that happened, which I found very interesting. Like if you did a nuclear test, and you went to the trouble of like having it underground so no one could really see it, but then came out and told everyone about it. I think that's part of this whole thing, is that the fact that they told everyone about it, the fact that they made it news, they're like, hey, we've just done this. Okay, that's really interesting, isn't it? What do you think about that world? I see it as a bit of positioning of US saying, we're not powerless yet. We're not toothless. You might think that we're dead in the water, but we ain't. Natalie Louise Coaching says, do you think Australia will jump and help like we have in the past for the Israel-Gaza conflict? If we're asked to, we will. And I think we're already pre-positioning for, not from a military standpoint, yes, from a military standpoint, but from a government-wide standpoint, I know that we're already pre-positioning for that. We're already in the kind of gears of it cranking up for people to go over there of varying levels of different sections of society and diplomats and such what, and aid as well. So yeah, like we're getting involved, but right from the start, as soon as this happened, our PM came out and made an announcement about it, where on one side of the conflict, which I thought was like, okay, like, yeah, you got to do something like that, I guess, but it was a pretty big sign on where Australia sits in this whole spectrum. Sammy Prepper says, hi from South Australia. It's 1:49 p.m. You're half an hour behind me. Did they ever find the 40 beheaded children? Asked Peter Rouse. No. And actually, I was watching a video of the CNN reporter who vehemently said that happened, getting harassed at one of the checkpoints into Gaza. And the odd thing about this video is people are like, oh, look at this, what's happening. And I'm like, yeah, okay, it's bad shit. Like, I don't think shit should happen to journalists. Like, I like information to get out there, and thus, the idea of journalism I like people to go out there, seek the truth, and put it out to other people so that we can see it. Freedom of speech and all that. That's me in a handbasket. But like, this is kind of like you reap what you sow. So you go out there and you don't do due diligence on the information that you're spreading. Surprise. It was a perfect example of one of my favorite sayings: fuck around, find out. So that's what's going on there. Where am I at? I'm on the East Coast, Sammy Prepper. I'm in a small rural town, kind of close-ish, I guess, to our nation's capital, but not that close. Can't get too close to it because it smells. All right, what else we got going here? The US ship that intercepted missiles that were bound for Israel from Yemen. So that US Navy ship was floating around in the Mediterranean. Missiles were fired from Yemen towards Israel, and it saw them, intercepted them, blew them up. Everyone was fine. Everything's fine. There was no fallout from it at all. Just very interesting stuff going on there. Very multifaceted. And if you're asking yourself, where's Yemen and what does Yemen have to do with this, then you need to go look up like what's been happening in Yemen for the past 50 years if you want, but for at least the last 3 years. And that should fill in some of the holes here in your information, and will help, I think, drive this idea that I've got, that we're really starting to see the teams form up now. Everyone's picking their teams. It's International Dodgeball World War III version. And, the two captains are sitting there going like, I'll have you, I'll have you, I'll have you. So that's what's been happening in that part of the world. All right, what else we got here? Let's move up to the Baltic region now, because there's been some stuff going on here. Story sent to me by one of my main sources through Instagram. It was an interesting story, and it just said underground cable got cut in the Baltic Sea. And I was like, okay. Now, I could just sort of look at that, or it failed in the Baltic Sea. I could just sort of look at that and go, yeah, I don't need to know this, whatever, let it go. But this person sent it to me, so I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to delve into this and read it a bit more. And we see some interesting stuff going on, that there are actually a pipeline and a communications cable cut in a very short period of time in the Baltic Sea. And again, we're thinking about the other things that have happened in the Baltic Sea recently. This particular one they're talking about went from Finland down to Estonia. So some interesting stuff going on there. Who has capability to do this? Well, a lot of the nations in the Baltic area have the capability to do it. So the means is there. Who has the drive to do it? Perhaps, maybe Russia is involved here. Russia might want to start to isolate places like Estonia, Lithuania, to keep them maybe a little bit off center, so then they can kind of push off, because at the moment that's almost like an enclave that NATO can essentially utilize. So that was my first read on it. Not necessarily the correct read, but that was my first read on it. I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? Also, could, within the realm of possibilities, could be false flag type stuff, could be, the NATO nations or NATO themselves actually doing this sort of stuff to go, look, see what they're doing, see what's going on here. Sweden launched an investigation into it, and I have not seen the result of that yet. Yo, Roscoe, how you going, bro? Hope things are nice and warm where you are, friend. Peter Rouse says, don't forget Gulf of Tonkin. They just rinse and repeat. Sammy Prepper says, I'm in a small town as well, Glossop, in the Riverland, not far from Renmark, and about 300 kilometres from Adelaide. Do you know where that is? I know where Renmark is, but never heard of Glossop before. But welcome from Glossop. Hope it's a nice place there. Yes, so eyes on the Baltic here. A lot of interesting stuff going on here. This is just a little reminder because I find this so fascinating as far as human behavior goes. What? Oh my God, Israel, Gaza, Palestine. We got to focus in on here. I'm like, do you just take down the Ukraine flags? Like, I thought I stand with Ukraine to the end. Poor Ukraine's just sitting there like, oh, what happened to us? You're yesterday's news, bro. See you later. You're out. No, that's still going on. There's still stuff happening there. Likewise, there's still stuff happening in Africa. There's still stuff happening in South Korea. There's still stuff happening in India and China. Still stuff happening in Pakistan. Still stuff happening in Turkey and Greece. All the stuff's still happening. Just people's focus isn't there right now. So they've got this is the latest football match, and we're all picking our teams. We go, oh yeah, I'm on team Israel. I'm on team Palestine. And everyone forgets that there's other stuff still going on. So there is this huge thing happening, Russia, Ukraine, and it's still moving around, and there's still really sketchy stuff going on. Some reports just said that up to, I think it was 240-foot shipping containers have just made their way to near the border of Ukraine, so on the Russian side, that are filled with munitions, which always makes me chuckle when I think about all those security professionals and mouthpieces that were talking a couple of months into the Ukraine war, where they were going, Russia's on their last legs, they're about to collapse, they're running out of bullets. I'm like, what the actual fuck are you talking about? You are speaking out of your ass here. This just goes to show they're not running out of bullets, and they make the bullets. But where those 40-foot containers came from, one allegation has them coming from North Korea. Hey, if you're a country that has very little interaction with the rest of the world economically, and you don't really have the means, the free market to spin those wheels yourself, what can you do? Just do the bad things. Do the things no one else wants to do. If no one's making munitions in the world, or if there's people who are banned from buying the munitions from the credible sources like the US, then you make them. Sell it off cheap. Hey, if you've got a communist work labor, you don't have to pay them. So yeah, why not? I'm not condoning it, by the way. Just in case you're wondering, I'm not condoning North Korea either. I don't like communism. I hate it. Fucking hate it. It was satire. I was being satirical. All right, let's jump back into the markets right now, and I'll quickly talk about some of the information that's coming out of the markets. If you've been keeping your eye on the markets at all recently, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it, but it's been red. It's been going down. A few commodities have been going up, which has been rather interesting to watch. One of the big ones has been gold, and especially gold in AU, in Aussie dollars, because the US dollar has been going down, which relative to the US dollar then puts the Aussie dollar further up. We're not above the US dollar, by the way, but I think we got down to like 63 cents maybe. I was not paying attention there for a little bit because I was just disgusted at it. 63, maybe 62 or something, and then crept back up. I think it might be 66 or 67 at the moment. And there's a few factors out there that could continue that trend. It's not necessarily going to happen. In fact, markets could open on Monday and do the up thing again, because that's what they do. When things go down, people go, oh, bargains, and buy, and then it goes back up. But it's that kind of temporary false kind of economy that we've been living out of for the last couple of years now. But we'll see what happens. You never know. It could be another little bounce, tick up and down. It could be the inevitable collapse that will happen in the economic markets. I don't think it is, but anyway, that's one of the reasons that gold has been going up and is now at the highest it ever has been in AU, in Aussie dollars, Aussie dollaroos. So interesting. And if you, like me, look at gold as an indicator of general fear in markets and thus general fear in the world itself, then that's pretty big sign that a lot of people are pretty afraid of the economic situation, what we're heading towards. If gold's up, silver's also up, not the highest it's ever been, but it's jumped up a little bit. And some of the pundits out there, some of those talking heads when it comes to the gold and silver world, are saying that silver could do the thing that everyone's waiting silver to do. It's like skyrocket. Potentially still one of the most undervalued commodities out there. But yeah, that's what's happening in the markets. That's the interesting stuff. I think I might have mentioned this too, that on the last SitRep, that there was a period there where gold was actually had dropped off dramatically. And I didn't have the means, but I was like, man, this is a really good buying opportunity. I thought it was a great buying opportunity. And hey, if you happen to do just that, if you happen to get in there and buy some of that gold when it was a bit cheaper, about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, good for you. Like, congratulations, you have done well. Sammy Prepper says the world's crazy at the moment. Yep. The world is always crazy, but it is particularly crazy now. I think maybe what we're seeing is a little bit like many different factors here, but we're seeing the manifestation of what's happened over the last couple of years where we've been locked down and fed fear for a long time. And people who are fed fear, and this has actually been scientifically studied, people who are fed fear have a lesser ability to make sane, rational decisions and are more likely to react inappropriately and violently. So we've been indoctrinated and soaking, marinating in fear of the great lurgy. COVID's killing everyone, except it wasn't. But people thought it was, and people still think it is for some odd reason, that there's this thing out there that's killing everyone. So after that, you start to see the manifestation of that kind of fear come out in people. So hopefully, like, what you should be thinking when you're hearing information like that is going, okay, I don't want to be indoctrinated into that fear. I want to take on information like this and think, how can I better prepare myself for the future if it does get worse? And that's probably my big belief, is that things are going to get worse. I'm not going to come on here and say, like, the zombie apocalypse is happening, unless it is. And then I'll try and do a sit rep just before it. But I don't want to come on here and go, it's all doom, it's all gloom, it's all collapsing, everything's going bad. I just believe that we are going to go into a time of less abundance, that we're going to have to do things a little bit harder than what we're used to. So prepare ourselves for that. And it's not that hard to prepare yourself right now. In fact, it's never been easier to prepare yourself than it is right now, because we have all the stuff. You can access books and buy them online now and get them sent to your house, so that if something catastrophic does happen, you have knowledge stored in your house. You can download things off the internet. You can go to your supermarket and buy things. You can buy nifty axes. You can buy whiskey. You can buy gas masks and tinfoil hats if you're so inclined. You can go and get all this stuff right now, and I recommend that you do start to think about that. Put a little bit of extra fat into your system. That's all you have to do. You don't have to build a fucking bunker. You don't have to stock it out for 25 years. You can if you want. That's cool. And if you do, send me photos, because I'd love to see that, because I'm super interested in that stuff. But you don't have to do that. You can just go buy an extra couple of cans every time you go to the supermarket. You can just have a couple of weeks worth of food stored up in your pantry and around your house. And that's going to help you fare better no matter what happens. If things go good, you'll be fine. If things go bad, you'll also be fine. So that's what we're trying to do here, is encourage that kind of information. So hopefully you're not taking on everything that I'm saying and going like, oh, doom and gloom, fear. Let me just catch up on some of these comments here. Take the Ride says, if you have any extra money in any currency that's actually valuable, send it to me. Lol. Peter S says, fortunately, I got talked into buying gold at USD 600. Hold on. Sammy Prepper, I closed my bank account and changed it into 30K in gold and 3 kilo of silver. I don't trust banks anymore, and the interest is pointless. Not a bad kind of repository of wealth, really. And that's also, just touching on when I was saying gold and silver before, I like to just remind people it's best not to think of it as an investment, like, oh, this thing's going to make me money. It's best to think of it as a bank, and you're creating your own bank. You are your own reserve bank, really, because that's what that's based on in theory. So that's the way I think of it. I put wealth into it and send it to the future by holding on to that gold and silver, and then I can take it back out, and maybe I've made money, maybe I have not made money, but I still get that wealth back, as opposed to the money which will be flitted away. Goodbye. Peter Rouse says, knowledge sound like Ty Lopez. I have no idea who that is. He talks about all kinds of subjects which I appreciate, and he interacts with his listeners. He's a good man. All right, well, I'll check out Ty Lopez then. Sounds very cool. All right, that's it for today, gang. Thank you much for joining me. As always, I really appreciate it. Hopefully there was something in my ramblings today that you find in some way helpful, and at least inspirational, so that you can go and get out there and do the good things. Because at the end of the day, don't rely on government, don't rely on the services to help you out. Rely on yourself, rely on your family, rely on your friends, rely on what the links and the networks that you build, the community that you make. Rely on that rather than rely on something that is utterly uninterested in whether you live or die, really, apart from how many votes they're going to get if you do die. So apart from that, stay safe out there, keep prepping, and until next time, Semper Paratus.